Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I should have listened to them. The warnings, the stories, all of it sounded like the kind of thing locals tell outsiders to keep them from straying too far into the woods. Whispering Pines Forest. Even the name sounds made up, like something out of a cheap horror movie. But I'm not one to shy away from a challenge. And when I heard about the trail that supposedly swallows hikers whole, I couldn't resist. I've been hiking solo for years. I've faced bad weather, tricky terrain, even a bear once. The thought of some cursed forest didn't scare me. It intrigued me. So, with a loaded pack and a trusty GPS, I headed out early on a brisk October morning, ready to prove the rumors wrong. The first few hours were uneventful. The trail was overgrown in spots, sure, but manageable. The trees stood tall, their branches clawing at the gray sky, and the air carried the crisp scent of decaying leaves. It was quiet, too quiet maybe. No bird song, no rustling of squirrels in the underbrush. Just my boots crunching on the dirt path and the occasional creak of the trees swaying in the breeze. It wasn't until I found the journal that things started to feel wrong. I almost stepped on it. A battered, leather-bound notebook, half buried in the dirt. It looked old, the edges of the pages curled and stained. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, dusting off the cover. There was no name, no indication of who it belonged to. But when I opened it, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The handwriting was frantic, the words scrawled in uneven lines. It started innocently enough. Entries about the beauty of the forest, notes on wildlife. But as I flipped through, the tone shifted. The carvings are everywhere. One entry read, symbols I don't recognize. They're on trees, rocks, even the ground. I've tried to ignore them, but I feel like they're following me. Another page described hearing whispers, faint at first, then growing louder. They're telling me to leave, but I can't. I don't know how to get out anymore. I'd be lying if I said it didn't unnerve me, but I'm stubborn. I told myself it was just some overactive imagination, someone trying to scare people away from their secret hiking spot. I slipped the journal into my pack and pressed on. That's when I noticed the carvings. The first one was on a tree, a strange spiral etched into the bark. It looked fresh, the wood beneath still pale. Then I saw another, and another. They weren't all spirals. Some were jagged lines. Others were shapes I couldn't make sense of, like a language I didn't understand. They became more frequent the farther I went, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me. The whispers started around midday. At first, I thought it was the wind, a faint murmuring that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. But as the afternoon wore on, the sounds grew clearer. Words, low and guttural, like a voice just out of reach. Leave. I stopped in my tracks, heart pounding. Hello. I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the forest. There was no response, just the rustling of leaves and that ever-present whisper. By late afternoon, my GPS was useless. The screen flickered, the map spinning wildly. I tried retracing my steps, but the trail seemed different, unfamiliar. The sun was sinking fast. the light fading to a murky gray that made the trees look like towering shadows. I set up camp in a small clearing, my nerves frayed. As I built a fire, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The whispers were louder now, almost conversational. I strained to catch the words, but they slipped through my grasp like smoke. Leave, or stay forever. The fire's glow cast long, flickering shadows, and that's when I saw it. Just beyond the ring of light, a figure stood motionless, tall and impossibly thin, its features obscured by the darkness. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Who's there?" I shouted, grabbing for the knife in my pack. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I didn't wait to find out what it wanted. I grabbed my flashlight and ran, the beam cutting through the dark like a lifeline. The whispers followed me, growing louder, more urgent. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes. That's when I found the tree. It was massive, its trunk gnarled and ancient. The spiral was carved deep into the bark, glowing faintly in the darkness. My flashlight flickered, the beam dimming until it sputtered out completely. I stood there, paralyzed, as the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. "I told you to leave." The voice was right behind me. I turned, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness and the weight of the forest pressing in. My legs gave out, and I collapsed at the base of the tree, my vision swimming. The search party found my tent the next day, abandoned and eerily undisturbed. The journal was sitting neatly on the sleeping bag, its pages filled with words I hadn't written. The last entry chilled them to the bone. "I told you to leave. No one ever found me. At least, not the version of me that walked into Whispering Pines Forest. If you find this journal, take the warning seriously. Some trails aren't meant to be walked." Story 2. I still see it sometimes. When I close my eyes at night, or when I'm alone in a dark room, it's there. That faint, warm glow, like a lantern swaying in the wind, always just out of reach. It's been a year since Ravenwood Forest, but the memory of that night hasn't faded. If anything, it's only grown sharper, like the forest itself is trying to remind me of what it took. Ryan and I had been together for 3 years. He was the adventurous one, always wanting to go further, climb higher, push limits. I loved that about him, or at least I thought I did. That's how we ended up in Ravenwood Forest, armed with nothing more than a half-charged phone, a cheap flashlight, and Ryan's unshakable confidence. The locals had warned us. Everyone did. They weren't the friendly, "you'll come back now" kind of people. No, they were the kind that stared a little too long and spoke in cryptic warnings. "Stay on the main trail," they'd said. "Don't go wandering. The woods don't like it when you wander." Ryan had laughed it off. "Every town has its ghost stories," he'd said, his grin as wide as the horizon. And like an idiot, I'd followed him into the trees. The first few hours were fine. The forest was beautiful, the kind of place that looked untouched by time. The sun filtered through the branches, casting golden patches on the ground. Ryan held my hand, pointing out little things he thought were cool. A squirrel, a strange mushroom, a tree twisted into the shape of a spiral. It was peaceful. Then the sun started to set. "We should head back," I said, glancing at my phone. No signal. Of course. Ryan waved me off. We're fine. The trail's right over there. Except it wasn't. We walked in what felt like circles, the trees closing in tighter with every step. The air grew heavier, colder. My flashlight flickered, and Ryan's jokes about spooky forests stopped. When the last sliver of sunlight vanished, we were completely, hopelessly lost. That's when we saw the light. At first, it was just a faint glow through the trees, like someone had left a lantern burning in the distance. Relief flooded me. It's a cabin, I said, or maybe a ranger station. Ryan squinted. Could be. Let's check it out. We started walking toward it, stumbling over roots and rocks in the dark. But no matter how far we went, the light stayed the same distance away. It didn't grow brighter or closer. It just hovered. That's weird, Ryan muttered. We kept going, the forest around us growing quieter with every step. No birds, no wind, nothing but the sound of our own breathing and the crunch of leaves underfoot. After what felt like hours, I stopped. Ryan, this isn't right. What do you mean? The light. It's just not normal. It's leading us somewhere. He laughed, but it sounded forced. It's just someone's porch light, Sam. Then why can't we reach it? Ryan didn't have an answer. He just kept walking, his jaw set, his flashlight swinging wildly. I followed, because what else could I do? The light wasn't going away, and neither was the suffocating darkness pressing in around us. We tried to change direction. Twice. Each time, the light reappeared in front of us, unwavering and patient. It wasn't following us. We were following it. Ryan stopped suddenly, his flashlight beam trembling as he pointed it into the trees. Do you hear that? I didn't hear anything at first. Then, faintly, the sound of branches snapping. Something was moving out there. Slowly, deliberately. Maybe it's an animal, I whispered, though I didn't believe it. Ryan shook his head. It's too big. The snapping grew louder, closer, and panic bubbled in my chest. Ryan, we have to go. Toward the light? He asked, his voice shaking. Do you have a better idea? He didn't. So we ran. The light stayed ahead, steady and unyielding, pulling us deeper into the forest. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but fear kept me moving. Behind us, the sound of snapping branches turned into something else, a low, guttural growl that didn't sound human or animal. Keep going, Ryan shouted, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. And then he wasn't there. I stumbled to a stop, spinning around. Ryan, the growling stopped. The forest was silent again. The light hovered ahead, brighter now, almost inviting. Ryan, no answer. I wanted to run toward the light, but something deep inside me screamed not to. Instead, I turned and bolted in the opposite direction. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I tripped over something hard and cold, hitting the ground with a painful thud. Bones, a pile of them, bleached white and scattered like dry leaves. I scrambled back, my hands trembling. That's when I saw it. The light hovering above me, closer than ever. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes. The sound of my own screams, the light enveloping me, a voice whispering something I couldn't understand. When I woke up, it was morning, and I was lying at the edge of the forest. A search team found me, their faces pale when I started mumbling about the light. Ryan was never found. The forest didn't give him back. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, following that impossible, unrelenting glow. And sometimes late at night, I see it again, hovering outside my window, just out of reach. Story 3. You never think it'll happen to you. The kind of story you read about in the news or hear whispered at campfires. But here I am, alive to tell you about Black Hollow Woods and the things I saw there. Or maybe I'm the one who got out just to warn the rest of you. We didn't mean to go that deep. That's what I tell myself when the guilt hits me hardest. It was supposed to be a quick hike, an overnight trip to test the new gear Ella had bought for our weekend adventures. Ella was always the fearless one, the leader. Me? I'm Claire, the reluctant follower. And then there was Jake, the pragmatist, always the one to bring an extra flashlight or remind us not to stray too far off the trails. But in Black Hollow Woods, no amount of caution can save you. We'd heard the stories, of course. Who hadn't? Kids vanishing, strange noises, odd symbols carved into the trees. But Ella laughed them off. It's folklore, she said, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. Every creepy old forest has its myths. Jake and I exchanged a look, but we followed her anyway. We always did. The hike started easy, the kind where the sunlight filters through the canopy and dapples the ground in warm patterns. But the deeper we went, the stranger it got. The air grew heavier, colder, and the trees seemed to press closer together, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. By the time we found the stone, the sun was already sinking low, casting long, eerie shadows. The stone was unlike anything I'd ever seen, smooth and black, about the size of a large suitcase, with strange symbols etched into its surface. They weren't random scratches. They formed patterns, deliberate and intricate. Ella's eyes lit up like she'd found buried treasure. This is it, she said, dropping to her knees. This is why we came. We came to camp, Jake said, his voice uneasy. Let's keep moving. But Ella wasn't listening. She reached out and touched the stone. The moment her fingers made contact, the forest seemed to hold its breath. And then I heard it, a faint singing, like a lullaby carried on the wind. It wasn't English or any language I recognized. The melody was beautiful, but wrong somehow, like it didn't belong to this world. Did you hear that? I asked. Jake nodded, his face pale. Yeah, we're leaving. No, Ella said, her voice soft, distant. She was still touching the stone, her eyes wide and unblinking. We're not leaving. This is where we're supposed to be. We argued, of course. Jake tried to pull her away, but she wouldn't budge. She kept mumbling under her breath, words I didn't understand. Finally, we gave up and set up camp nearby, figuring she'd snap out of it by morning. That night, the singing grew louder. It didn't come from one direction. It surrounded us, weaving through the trees like a ghostly choir. The symbols on the stone began to glow faintly, pulsing in time with the melody. Ella sat by the stone, staring at it like it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. She started humming along, her voice blending seamlessly with the song. Ella, stop, I begged. This isn't right. We need to go. She turned to me then, her face serene, almost otherworldly. It's showing me the way home, she said. Home. The word sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't home. This was a dark, twisted forest where people disappeared. I didn't sleep that night, too afraid of what might happen if I closed my eyes. When dawn broke, Ella was gone. So was the stone. Jake and I searched for her all day, calling her name until our voices were hoarse. The forest seemed to mock us, repeating the lullaby with every rustle of leaves and whisper of wind. We found no sign of Ella, no footprints, no disturbed ground. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. By the second day, Jake wanted to leave and get help. I wanted to stay, convinced we'd find her if we just kept looking. In the end, he left, promising to return with a search party. I stayed behind, but I wasn't alone for long. That night, the singing returned, louder than ever. The cymbals glowed in the darkness, carving themselves into the trees around me. I felt them watching, felt the weight of something ancient and malevolent pressing down on me. I ran, but no matter where I went, the song followed, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. When Jake came back with the Rangers, they found me wandering the edge of the forest, clutching a scrap of fabric I swore belonged to Ella. I don't remember how I got there. They said I was whispering the lullaby, the same haunting melody we'd heard that first night. Ella was never found. Jake stopped talking to me after that, unable to bear the memories or the guilt. As for me, I moved far away, but sometimes, late at night, I hear the singing. It calls to me, beckoning me back to Black Hollow Woods. And I'm terrified I'll go. If you ever find yourself near Black Hollow Woods, stay away. If you hear singing, no matter how faint or beautiful, run. Because once it finds you, it never lets go.